Hey everyone, welcome to this Backstage episode. And we have today Vidhi Mukerjea with us, and she should be joining the room anytime soon. And this is going to be a supremely interesting episode. And I'll just wait for her to join the room before I ramble on. Vidhi's come out with a beautiful, haunting memoir named Devil's Daughter, and it is something supremely riveting, and I'll just wait for her to join. And I think she's in the room, so I'll just add her as a speaker. Hi, Vidhi. Can
Hel-
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Oh,
you. Hi.
perfect. Welcome to Backstage, and welcome to the Kitabi Karwan Podcast on Backstage.
Thank you
Uh,
so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad to finally have this conversation with you. This is, I mean, I've been reading your memoir for the past week now. And to be very honest, I've been reading it at a very slow pace because it's a very delicately written memoir and it deals with a lot of sensitive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, I mean, I can't, I mean, it took me a while to process reading it, so I can't even begin to imagine how you felt while going through it, and even for that matter, writing about it again. But yeah, that's largely going to be the context of our conversation today, everyone. And so, but Vidhi, before let's just start on a much cheerer note than this. And this is something I ask all my guests whenever they come for an interview with me. Is and it's going to be a very unique question because you, unfortunately or fortunately, had a lot of exposure of your personal life to the media, and
Sure.
you've been very open in your memoir. But something that we always find is that authors are generally, very exposed to the media in terms of,
Hmm.
particularly in recent times, you can find out a lot about them, and a lot of people try to keep, and they, as they rightfully should, keep a lot of their lives hidden away and keep things away from themselves. So my first question to you is, um would you mind telling us something that, the world doesn't really know about you, but you would really want them to know, something that's not already out there?
Oh, wow, that's a very interesting question that I haven't been asked before. Oh, yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing that I haven't really told people is that, like a lot of people think that, it's very strong that I have written this memoir, and, I'm sure a lot of people know how much it kind of took out of me. But I guess one thing I would like to tell everyone is that, I'm still like on the way there. I'm still not by any means like healed or like completely fixed. I mean, it's such a long process and journey, right? So I never want to kind of say that I'm all there, because a lot of talks that I've been having, a lot of interviews that I've been having, a lot of people say that, oh, you're so kind of mature, you've reached to a kind of place of, everything, this that, but I really don't. I mean, I want to be as humble as possible and say that, we're all kind of on our own journeys, and I'm still such a big work in progress, because there's just still so much work to be done. And I want to be as relatable to people as I can.
And that's such, so I completely get where you're coming from, right? And think uh I think this just comes with the level of self-awareness a lot of people just start getting into their late 20s or like mid 20s. And I guess it's also particularly the bit about being a work in progress, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in context of recovering from something, but
Hmm.
just in like how you're imagining life, right? I think all of us at some point or the other do realize that we are work in progresses, and obviously perfection is something to be chased but to be achieved, and you head towards it. And particularly in your case, it requires a lot more emotional coping that needs to be built into that. But that actually kind of makes me ask you the other question that I had on in my mind, that, so I mean, I can't, as I said, I can't really even begin to imagine what it was going through this process, let alone at such a young age of barely being 18, right? And you also, I mean, you write about it in your memoir that you felt like you've almost written this memoir thrice in your head,
Yeah.
and you finally got about to doing it in when you were in Hong Kong, stuck during the pandemic. But so writing this memoir also meant revisiting everything that has happened since your 18th birthday, right? It meant
Hmm.
going through all of those memories and all those emotions that you felt, and these were really scarring. Like there was a lot of them were really happy memories of your travel or your time with your friends, but a lot of them were also very scarring, very obviously.
Hmm.
So, and this is something I always talk to authors about, like what is this experience of being able to write about these difficult memories or difficult things that you yourself experience, right? Like for fiction authors who are imagining things, it's still like there is a barrier between them and the world. But here,
Hmm.
when you're writing about your own life, how did it feel? Like, what was your experience writing this memoir, particularly in this context?
I mean, I think I've thought about this question even before I started writing my memoir. Like, what would it be like, writing about my life? And I thought for some reason that I'd be singled out into this kind of a bunch, a handful of people that's kind of doing this. But in fact, when I started writing, like coming off my earlier point, all I wanted to actually do was just relate with people, relate with my next door neighbor, relate with the person sitting next to me on the train. Like that's what my main kind of idea was. And I think the more I wrote, the easier it got, because
Right,
I was able to kind of feel empowered through my own story,
right,
and it's almost like a therapy session that you're doing with your long therapy session that you're having with yourself. And that's what I keep saying, because people always advise, when people are going through something, the first advice that I've realized that most people give you is, go talk to someone, or like, talk to your friends or talk to your neighbors or do something like that. But for me, I just felt like the best thing I could do for my was actually talk to myself,
right,
because that was the true healing experience that I had when I was just sitting in front of my laptop and talking to myself, essentially. And
right.
that's how kind of the memoir was born.
Yeah. And it's very interesting when you mention that, because I think, I mean, I got that. I mean, I don't know if it's something that I'm looking at in retrospective when you're mentioning this, but particularly when I was reading about you traveling through South America, right?
Hmm.
And the way you wrote about it, and the way you wrote about your experiences and how you felt. I mean, it was very clear that this is talking to yourself is something that really works for you. I mean, it doesn't always work for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people end up being. I mean, and not that you weren't. There were points where I felt you were being too harsh on yourself, but some people get caught up in that web, and they are really abusive themselves. And it's great that this worked for you over time, like over time that you could get there.
Hmm.
But it's very interesting that you mentioned therapy as well, because you write about how initially you were slightly guarded, or you didn't have really great experiences with therapists,
Hmm.
right? And eventually, when you found Gabriel in Spain, that really started working out really well for you. So, what was that about? Like, do you think it was maybe was it? Do you think it was, in retrospect? Obviously, do you think it was you who had probably was not able to receive therapy that well, or was it something that flowed out from therapists? The reason that I'm asking you this question is because I think in India, mental health is a topic which is not really spoken about a
Yeah,
lot,
it's a taboo
right?
topic for
Yeah,
sure.
it's supremely taboo, and I think it becomes really important to discuss. Like, as important as it is to discuss the importance of therapy, it's also
Yeah.
important to discuss where therapy can go wrong or why it can make people feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Right? So, what was your the reason or like context from which you kind of felt a bit guarded towards therapy or didn't particularly feel comfortable with it?
So that's a very good question, actually. So basically, when I first, yeah, answering your first question, it was 100% me that was guarded off, because a lot of people said, oh, you should talk to this person. And it's like, it's not easy to talk to people at all when you're going through something. Actually, that's the hardest thing to do, is just bring someone in, even your closest friend. I mean, even when this whole thing was happening, I couldn't even talk to my best friend about it, because I didn't want to. If I
Mm-hmm.
really needed to, I would, but I didn't want to talk to anyone about it. And it eats at you. I mean, it eats you up in a very kind of unhealthy way almost. But I'm very much under the belief that I think one needs to go through that. I think one needs to go through the whole process of being harsh on themselves to kind of come out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
see, I guess my case is a little bit different, because for me, I mean, there were points I really didn't think I was going to come out of it. There were points I didn't want to come out of it. But every time I was pushed like to the edge. I mean, as I'm sure you've read in my book, there was that whole hospital episode that happened. And, without sounding too cheesy, when I woke up in hospital that morning, I didn't know that I didn't want to actually wake up, but I did. And that just made me realize, okay, like I have to kind of do something now. And that's when my real anxiety started. That's when my real panic attacks actually started, when I was going through all of this. And when that happens, I realized in my head that, okay, I'm doing something right. If I'm feeling anxious right now, that means I'm asking the right questions. Because the true thing is, we're actually really scared to kind of face these things. We're really scared to understand why we're anxious. We don't want to face any of these, topics about ourselves. We want to kind of keep repressing them and pushing them further and further and further down. But for me, the true kind of magic where I really started understanding myself and healing was when I came across this concept called shadow work.
Okay.
I mean, we can touch upon it now, we can touch upon it later if you want, but essentially,
No, please do. Please do.
yeah,
I
so
mean, I was something I
essentially,
was going to ask you about.
yeah, so shadow work, it's brilliant, right? Basically, when I just this concept kind of came about when I was writing my book. In the midst of writing my book, because obviously I have to revisit a lot of painful memories and a lot of hard things that I kind of just didn't want to even, realize that these things happen in my life. But when I was writing all of this, I was in a terrible headspace. I mean, I was really, really, really like anxious and depressed. And I was learning about certain ancient philosophies simultaneously, and one I picked up about Taoism. And through that, you know how Google is now. You search
Yeah.
one thing, and then you go into you go down a rabbit hole. Like, I mean, then
Yes.
you're at some other place only. So then through this, I found out this whole psychotherapy called shadow work.
Right.
And shadow work is essentially where you are understanding the darkest parts of yourself. So we as human beings, we have two sides to us. We have a light self and we have a dark self. And the light self is essentially what we see in our everyday lives. We see, like, when I'm me talking to you right now, that is what we want to show the world. The
Right.
person, that is our light self. Our darker self is the parts that we repress about ourselves, that we feel that is socially unacceptable. And you
Right.
see glimpses of those when you are kind of arguing with someone, or when you're really angry, or when you're extremely like ashamed about something, right? And
Right.
what's our instant reaction? What we do when that happens, we push it away. We don't confront that, and we think, okay, we're going to push it under the rug and this never happened. And
Right.
it's just a basic human instinct that's been passed down through generations now. And when that happens, like, I got into the space, like, for 4 months I was essentially like doing, and you're asking, basically it's a self psychotherapy, and you're asking yourself the most intricate questions about yourself. So you're facing topics like insecurities, your family, your friends, sexuality, all of these really hard hitting topics. And then you kind of get in the space where you suddenly see all these flaws about yourself. I don't like to call them flaws, but I can't think of another word. But you start seeing all these kind of imperfections about yourself, and you really beat yourself up on you, because that's who you see, like, oh my god, holy shit, this is who I am as a person.
Right.
But the point is, now when you're doing this psychotherapy, and there's a guide to it, I mean, if you Google it, you kind of see it, and you have to work through these areas. You have to accept it. Like, I'll give you a small example if you want. Like, let's take jealousy for an example, okay? And
Right.
you come across this question like, okay, am I jealous of this girl? And me as a girl, what's my first instinct to say? I'm going to say no, right? No, I'm not jealous of this girl. But and then I feel this like uncomfortable, weird thing. And that uncomfortable feeling is actually the yes that I've pushed away behind in the back of my mind. The whole point of shadow work is to bring that answer yes into the front of your mind. Except, okay, yeah, I might be jealous of this girl. Why
Mm-hmm.
am I jealous of this girl? And break it down. You're essentially decoding that answer. And to the point, then you get there and you're like, okay, actually, I don't need to be jealous of this girl at all.
Right.
So you're doing that with essentially like every single aspect of your life. I mean, it's super, super tough. I'm not like, this is not something that's easy at all. And
Right.
like,
No,
it
it
takes,
clearly
yeah.
doesn't sound easy. I mean,
It's really
yeah.
intense.
Like because I mean, like in just carrying forward example, right? I mean, jealousy is a very ugly emotion to deal with.
Hmm.
And even the very first part of it, right, accepting jealousy as an emotion that you're experiencing. And I think all of us tend to, at some point or the other, do that, not accept our negative emotions and kind of try and, as I think you very aptly put it, brush it under the rug, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it sounds like a very interesting thing to try out, and I think I probably will, like, sometime soon. But
Yeah, I'll send you
yeah,
my book on it that I kind of read about, so I can send
yes,
you the PDF version.
please do. That'll be great, and I think I'll put it out for, like, because if it's a public document, I can put it out for
100%.
people.
Yeah,
Yes, that'll
definitely. I
be
would love for
that's
you to
a
kind of share
great
it.
area to go into. But this actually, like, again, it's great that how this conversation is going. It actually just leads me to the other thoughts that I had, and so something that I mean, I think a lot of people who read your memoir might struggle with is the kind of empathy you have, particularly towards your mother, right? I mean, regardless of what happened or what it is, it becomes, and particularly not just the context of, what happened around your 18th birthday, but in terms of how you do write about how while growing up you had a lot of conflict with her, which eventually, like, for a couple of years or a year before your 18th birthday, start turning into a more mature, more friends like relationship where you're a lot more closer to her, right? So because it's such a delicate emotion to come up with, right? Empathy. And especially in your context, like, how close you are to your father, and what he went through because of her, or both of them went through because of each other, right? How was this process for you? Like, I mean, I think for me, I mean, beyond courage and bravery, I think it requires tremendous energy and self-awareness and forgiveness on your part. So what was this like a process for you, or was this just something instantaneous that happened?
I mean, it was such a big process, I think it took years for me to kind of arrive at this, because it took. So I'll tell you how this happened. It's very interesting because
Mm-hmm.
the way I actually began to kind of empathize with my mother is, see, empathy is something like the majority of the population don't understand what it is what I've realized. Like, we don't actually know what empathy is, because we have a tendency to actually confuse the words empathy and sympathy.
Right.
And it really took a lot of judgment that was thrown onto me, right? I had to go through a lot of people's kind of shit. I had to go through a lot of just irritating kind of comments for me to realize how wrong it is for me to judge someone else,
Right.
because judgment was a huge part of my life. I mean, I was essentially kind of surrounded by that throughout, even when I was a kid. That's essentially like how I was brought up in my environment, in my society. Just everyone just judges on the person next to you.
Right.
And when all of that kind of fell onto me, I it kind of really broke me down, and I just began thinking about my mom as a child. I mean, she had her first kid at 15 years old, and
Mm.
that is the toughest thing to go through at that point. How can you even begin to comprehend what this person is going through or what this person is thinking? So for
Right.
me, that's what the kind of breaking point was, to really understanding my mother and really kind of empathizing with her, not sympathizing with her. Just like I couldn't
Mhm.
even begin to understand what she was going through, but I had to try. And for that, I had to get back in touch with her and to actually, understand her as a person.
Right. Right. No, that does make sense. I mean, obviously, like, I mean, that's, I mean, it becomes clearer when you write about it also. Like, you write about it after you've met her after years. I think you did not talk to her for, or like, to her for 3 years, and then you met her, and that kind of led you towards a more empathetic route. But Vidhi, now I would just like to, I don't know, take a step back and kind of talk about a bit more about you, and like what's your personality like, because I mean you obviously love to write, and but you did mention quite late in the book that you weren't particularly a bibliophile as a kid, like you started reading quite late in life.
Yeah.
But so that's a very interesting mix, because most of the time people who love to write are people who love to read as well,
Who
right?
loved
But they
it?
can sort of go hand in hand. But there's obviously not there's nothing mandatory about it, but it's a very interesting idea. So what was this like? What was there any particular reason you did not read earlier on, or
No,
what drove you towards reading?
I don't know. I think you're gonna really laugh when I say this, but I'm not even joking. I think in my life I've read like 3 books.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
And
was trying so hard after you said that I would not laugh at it,
yeah,
but
it's
okay, wow.
fine. But like,
Yeah.
I say this very openly. I think in genuinely in my life I've read like 3 like, and this is especially like only in the last 3 years have I read these 3 books. Like one
Okay.
being Shantaram, one being
Right.
Sapiens, and the
Right.
other being Power of Now. So I kind of think, okay, all these 3 were very intellectual books. So I kind of, have made up for the books that I haven't read. But
Uh,
no, I
okay.
mean, I don't know why I wasn't a reader. The thing is, like, as a kid, I was not an academic kid. I was a very creative kid, right? I was
Right.
very like into the arts. I love cooking. I love like painting. I love drawing, and
Right.
that's kind of what my focus was on. And I think I was just like my mom kind of put this big, enormous pressure on me for to kind of be very good at my academics and to kind of
Right.
be this avid reader, and I think she kind of forced that upon me,
Right.
and I probably resented that. I probably kind of just refrained from that and didn't. I did the opposite of what she wanted me to do. But
Right.
it's as simple as how some kids just are readers and some kids aren't, and
Yeah.
it's something honestly like I find it so funny and ironic that I've actually written a book because so many people think that I'm just this big reader, and I'm like
Mm.
I'm not because I haven't like all of my the way I write, my education, all of that has just been through the last 6 years of me learning just through traveling and talking to people. It's
Right.
like this is gonna sound really weird, but like I learned so much just through talking through people and just observing people talk. Like for me, it's as good as reading a book because like I have a weird way of just picking up things. I
Right.
love like it's something that I don't understand, but I can just sit and listen to people converse because that's how I kind of educate myself.
Mm.
And like I just with even with writing, I mean, like I loved the whole process of writing. I don't think this is gonna be my first book because I really want to kind of write my second book, which is gonna be about sustainable travel and everything that I didn't put in my first book. But
Right.
something I do know is like, yeah, I mean, I really need to start reading that I really know that.
Well, yeah, well, you know where to come to for recommendations, but yeah, but
Yeah.
it's quite interesting because you mentioned travel, and that's very evident in your book that you're absolutely fond of traveling and have learned a lot in life because of traveling and meeting newer people. And it was refreshing to read about your experience in South America, particularly because
Yes.
yeah, like few reasons. Like first, I have always wanted to go to South Africa. It's something that's been on my, particularly Machu Picchu. I'm a very major history
Yeah.
nerd, so it's just something there. But the way you went about it, right? I mean, I think uh and particularly in the context of which you wrote this book, like, I mean, I'll be very honest. I was not aware of who you are as a person. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
I'd heard of you, but not about who you are as a person before, like, I read your memoir, right? So, I mean, if someone would have ever told me that, oh, okay, Vidhi Mukerjea is in, well, South America, it would not be this life, right? I mean, I would always
Yeah.
end up imagining you living like in a privileged, I know, some really nice hotel and not,
Hmm.
slumming it out in the hostels or something. And it was really refreshing to read this. I mean, it actually it just went on to showcase, at least for me, how much you actually like to travel.
Yeah.
So, right, I mean, but something I want to ask you is, have you traveled in the past couple of years? Like ever since the lockdown kicked in? I know you came from Hong Kong and probably went to Bombay and then you were in Uttarakhand, but anywhere else, like anywhere else in India? I
Yeah, I
wanted to
mean,
explore.
no, about since then, so for me, traveling is like I've almost made it like a relationship to me, because I've just seen how much it's taught me more than anything. Like I'm kind of like just I have this art now how to find good deals on hostels and flights. So I
Please help
literally
me.
it's like
Please help me
a
when next.
superpower that I have now.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean that's exactly what I want to write about, in my
Right.
second book because and especially I want to cater it to the audience like in India right now,
Mm-hmm.
specifically like around, just because it changed my world. I mean, before all of this happened, I was traveling, like, the whole concept of traveling is, oh, okay, book a flight, go stay in a hotel, go to the restaurants, go see these places, and bus khatam.
Right.
But that's what everyone thinks. Oh, okay, let's go to a place and do this.
Right.
But for me, I mean, it came up very, funnily, because me and my best friend in London, we were going through kind of just this really horrible time together.
Right.
And I was mentally not in the best place. She was mentally not in the best place. And our universities were not conducive to our mental space at all.
Right.
And London is a city where, like, even though there are so many people, you can feel quite lonely in.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't fitting that kind of lifestyle in London anymore at all. I knew internally that this wasn't me.
Right.
So we kind of, one summer, we just we kind of literally went and worked in bars and restaurants, saved up some money, and decided, okay, we're gonna go to South America with a backpack on a one-way ticket. We had enough money, like we've spoken to enough people to kind of know what to kind of expect and do. We had no idea. But we literally just hopped on a flight and we figured it out day by day by day. And the thing is, when you get there, you meet people, like, I'm telling you, all my trips there, 60% of my trips are made from the people and 40% are the destinations and the
Right.
views and the everything else. Because
absolutely
every
true.
single person is just on the same wavelength as you. Like, when, for example, I'll just give you a small example. We were in Peru, okay?
Mhm.
We wanted to go to Colombia, and it's a $8 bus. It's a $8 bus, and we
Wow.
went with people that we met in the hostel itself. And the hostel
Right.
itself is only like $10 a night. And
Wow.
when we were running out of money, we were able to work in the hostel behind the bar and cover our costs. It's stuff like that. Like,
Right.
it's incredible. It's just, it opens up a whole new world, and these are friends that you kind of make for life. Like, if I go
Right.
anywhere in either Australia or Argentina somewhere, I have like a whole list of people that I met in this hostel that I can call, that will give me a bunch of things to do in that budget.
Right.
So it's just this way. It's almost a hack. I found this hack of traveling on a budget, which is so crazy, because it was all my money. It was not anyone else's. Like, I earned the money. I would work at some like really shady, stupid bars and hostels and all. I'd earn
Right.
it, and then I'd go spend it all on just travel, and I wouldn't feel bad about it. And then I'd just keep redoing that whole cycle. And I think that is something that you can't take it away from anyone, because it's just those are like experiences, and that is what education is to me. Like, I think that kind of an education is just incredible.
No, and of course it is. I mean, I think it's wonderful that it was to hear. I mean, I read about it, and now I can hear the excitement in your voice. I mean,
Yeah.
I could read the excitement earlier, and now just like I can hear it as well, right? And it's absolutely fabulous that you found life experiences through something that you actually enjoyed doing and were able to help yourself in this healing process that you were going through. But something that just crossed my mind when you were talking about this, particularly when you mentioned, that you funded it yourself, and that just made me think about I forgot the name of the journalist who wrote this article where she mentioned
Malvika Sangvi.
Malvika Sangvi, right?
Yeah.
So she mentioned that you got it funded from someone else, like your father was funded through some offshore accounts, etc.
Yeah.
But the question's not about that. It's not actually not about that. The question was much rather about how the media has treated you, right? Like, the media has been horrendous to you. Or at least a major chunk of it has been. I'm sure there have been some good pockets here and there, right? But and in that context, particularly now that when you've written this memoir, and now because you're doing publicity tours and whatever, like, I mean, you're having this conversation, I've particularly noticed that you haven't obviously spoken a lot to the media. I mean, there have been written interviews. I saw a couple online. I think I saw an Instagram live today in the afternoon. But and obviously you're doing this now, which is great. But I mean, were you, like, I'm sure you were uncomfortable, but how do you kind of what was it? What was the story that you sold to yourself as to how do you go about communicating with the media, or like even agreeing to do something like this, right? Like, I mean, it's a live interview on a platform where people can tune in and listen to what you're saying. It requires particular courage when you're coming in your particular context, right? When you've had a bad experience with the media in the past.
Yeah. I mean, this is a topic that's obviously, it's quite nuanced, because like it's like they prepared me for it. The everything that happened to me, I mean, what goes around comes around. Like, it's not like, conversations like these, it's like such a pleasant refresher to kind of have conversations like this with you, or like other conversations with younger people that I've had in the past. But even now, I mean, like, it's not like they are so kind of nice or amazing to me. A lot of them are just asking me really ridiculous and insensitive questions still, but it's about how I carry myself. And I have to keep having that confidence in myself that, no, like, I'm never going to let anyone else take away my story again. I
Yeah.
think that's the main thing when I knew that I was getting back into kind of this space.
Right. Yeah. Also, with the, I mean, obviously, like, is something almost even non-celebrities or non-famous people deal with, right? Trolling, right? I think
Hmm.
it's just an unfortunate part of what today's internet culture is, where it's just easy to just be absolutely disgustingly horrible to someone and just walk away scot-free. What is your process of dealing with trolls? I'm sure they just come after you often.
Honestly, I just ignore them. Like, I've just been toughened up so much the last 6 years that, like, it doesn't phase me anymore, because earlier, like, I actually just got asked this question today, and I said, like, it used to really affect me, when these things happened. It used to really affect me when I was alone. I never let my vulnerable side out to anyone. Like, no one, if you knew me back then, or if my friends or my family saw me, they would never think that I'm getting affected with this. Because when this is happening at such a magnitude, where a whole country is essentially talking about you and your family, you don't
Right,
have an option but to tune it out.
right,
And when I was alone, it really did affect me. It hurt me so much to the point that now I actually don't care about it at all. Because, I mean, listen, like, we're human. We obviously, there's an element of us that does care. Someone
right.
leaves a bad review, and I'll just be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, but then it just, I'm like, whatever. Like, okay, it's his perspective. It's his or her kind of conjecture. Let them have their opinion.
Right, right. Fair enough.
Because
That
ideally, like, we also shouldn't judge people who judge.
I mean, sure, but I think, I mean, I as much as agree with you on principle there, I think it becomes slightly a slippery slope when it comes down to uh, judging people who are actually going after you. I mean, not just judging you, right? I
Hmm.
mean, someone who's there's a difference between someone like saying, "Oh, Siddharth's just an average person," or "I don't think he's a good interviewer," as opposed to saying just coming on to this chat and abusing me, hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between the two. But anyway, Vidhi, I have one question for you before we actually open this up for the audience to maybe ask you a few couple of
Sure.
questions. But your memoir has like, have your parents or your family members read it? What was their reaction, or like, were they did they feel? I don't know if you want to share this at all. That
Yeah.
is in the first place. I mean, did they feel like ill not represented well, or like maybe that you said too much about things that probably shouldn't have been shared? I don't know, maybe just things off the top of my head. What was
No.
their reaction?
So basically, I think, like, when, from my dad, like, I heard he was super proud of me. I think it brought tears to his eyes. I mean, I did. When I first started writing it, I didn't want anyone else's influence, affecting my writing. So
Right,
I only showed it to everyone, like, right after the whole final draft was done, and they were all amazing. I think with my mom, she just recently read the book, and for her, she did say, I wish you kind of did consult me on a few things before. But at the end of the day, she was so understanding, because she did say it's my story, and it's how I remember it, and it's how I kind of went through it. So, and that's kind of a level of maturity that I wasn't expecting her to have, because I was quite nervous, obviously, what she would kind of think about it. But the point is, I did tell her, like, no matter what, like, I'm there for you, like, I am here, and I'm not gonna kind of let go, even though there's a lot of things that are probably not in a favorable light. I
right,
am there with you. And I think for her, when she was reassured about that, she was immensely proud of me.
right, right. No, and obviously, I mean, like, so my question, like, I get that, right? It was actually the part that actually kind of got me thinking was about you've shared like, not, I wouldn't call them private personal details, but like probably details that they consider demons for themselves, right? That they're dealing with, not just your parents, but your family members as well, like particular issues. And I mean, that always is a sensitive thing to talk about, but it's great that to know that, like, I mean, beyond a couple of hiccups, it's great as an equation between you and the family, because something that I took away from the book, that you really cared about your family and
Yeah.
were very involved with them. So that's a very interesting bit for me to carry over. But
Yeah, we were just there. We've just gone through so much together, you know. So like, I mean, these all are very inconsequential. Like they knew, because everything is already out there in the family. So I mean, in the media. So I think for them, like what I really respect is everyone was just like, listen, it's your story. It's how you write it.
right.
So I got very lucky with the way they thought about that.
That's actually very great. Like, I mean, they had this perspective on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
It's very. I'm very grateful for that.
This was absolutely lovely of you to do this with us, and thank you so much for doing this. It was absolutely wonderful talking to you, and
Absolutely.
like,
Thank you so much.
and honestly, I am so happy that you ended up writing this memoir, because I mean, I can't really speak for the rest of the world, but I can at least speak for myself, that I had a very changed perspective about, not just about you, but your family, and how things have played out. Because I've just been an spectator, an audience member. That's it, right? And I think it's important for people to kind of write more about themselves, or like to people to read things about, not just people who are in the news kind of thing, but just in general, right? I mean, about getting to know who people are. And because I think people are multidimensional, and people tend to paint them with that one incident or one instance in their life, which may or not actually even be related to them, right? Right. So, I mean, thank you so much for doing this, Vidhi. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was a really, really good conversation. I really enjoyed it as well.